Imagine your morning routine could shift into something that improves your digestion, your immune health, your mood, your brain health, and so much more. Maybe you're thinking that that routine would be exhausting or really difficult to keep up with, but what if I told you it was as simple as making your morning coffee? Welcome to the Discover Health podcast, where we explore the power of gut health, nutrition, and lifestyle to help you feel your best every day. I'm Dr. Josh Sharp, your guide on this journey to better digestion, more energy, and overall well-being. Ready to start discovering? Let's hit the trail. Welcome back to another episode of Discover Health Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Joshua Sharp, and joining me today is a special guest, Gabe Dough. Gabe is a serial entrepreneur, inventor with 3 U.S. patents, and the founder of Good Bru, which is a prebiotic and probiotic formula backed by dozens of clinical studies and published research papers. He's a regular guest on podcasts. In fact, he's coming fresh off a podcast earlier this morning. He's on radio shows where he shares his passion for gut health, the entrepreneurial journey, and how better guts can help build health for Americans. In today's episode, Gabe, he's the creator of Good Bru, a gut brain, and he's a gut brain health educator. He's sharing how simple, intentional morning brew can become foundational for better energy, for whole body resilience and well-being. Gabe, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Josh. Thanks for the wonderful introduction, and I think we'll have a wonderful conversation. The gut is important to everything. It's essential to all aspects of our health and well-being.
I couldn't agree more. It's something that we focus on so much with the clients and patients that I work with. It's been a major focus. And honestly, I think it holds the power to unlocking so many different areas of health for people that are stuck. And so I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. Now, I know from reading about you that you've experienced your own health struggles. And one of the things that I love to ask my guests is the why behind what they do and how did they get into what they're doing now. So if you could just walk us through your own health struggles and what led you to creating this brand and creating this product.
Right. So it's like everything in life. There's multiple aspects to this, and the gut is essential to our health. It's just not secondary or tertiary. It's primary. It's primary, just like exercise and sleep and the foods we eat. It's primary. So people need to understand that. I think that's some people are now learning that, and other people still don't understand that. Your gut is, and Hippocrates knew this, and ancient people knew this. Your gut is the center of everything that kind of happens with the rest of the body. So actually, many years ago, when I was in graduate school, we started, before probiotics were really becoming as well known and mainstream it is now. There was a conversation about multiple sclerosis, and there was a theory that MS was related to the gut because people in developing countries didn't experience MS like people in developed countries, and now that's a fairly well-respected theory. In addition to dementia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's being related to the gut, very strong correlations there, and specifically to the gut microbiome, the metabolites that are produced there. So as an entrepreneur, the way life took me in different directions, I was in an environment where I recognized this prebiotic fiber that we're using now in Good Bru and the probiotic, and it just as an entrepreneur, and the way people sometimes think as entrepreneurs, I kind of put the two and two together, and I thought about the idea of how important the gut and gut health was going to become. As far, it always was important. It's not that it wasn't important. How important it was going to become as people became aware of how it affects their health. And so it kind of dawned on me that there was a potential here to provide a very useful and healthy product that was going to be easy to use. And I thought that was a key aspect also of gut health, was to make something that was easy to use. So the mission and the why is to help people improve their health and to help our society improve health through gut and through something that works and something that's easy to use. I also personally experienced really severe GERD and acid reflux for a number of years, and I mean really severe. I wouldn't even sit down at a meal without a 32-ounce cup of water. And so there was a period where I'd worked on one precursor to the Good Brew product. It was too hard to make. And then I experienced those gut health issues while I was working on something else. And it really made me, realize that I had to get back to working on the gut, the gut product that I had started working on a while back. And I did heal my GERD and acid reflux. And I think people need to know that there's many of these gut health issues that modern medicine in the Western world, anyways, doesn't target for curing. It targets for treating the symptoms. And it's very severe because acid reflux and GERD, not only are the people that have that know how debilitating it is, even when you have it on a short-term basis, but people that suffer with it chronically, I mean, it really messes with their lives. But longer term, it's the precursor to cancer and these really invasive surgeries. And then the treatments were the proton pump inhibitors and antacids. They don't cure anything, but they actually end up making the problem worse because lowering the acidity of the stomach then means that you're not digesting your food properly, meaning you're not absorbing the nutrients that you need, which means that you're now actually disrupting the health of your gut and then your body overall, even more so over time. And you're really only more susceptible to the things that are causing the acid reflux and GERD in general. So those are short-term, temporary things to relieve pain, but they're not cures. And so we didn't invent Good Brew as a cure, but we get so many. It's more of a foundational gut health product, but we get many testimonials from people that it helps them with things that they haven't been able to for years solve with their doctors in terms of like chronic constipation or acid reflux and GERD. So, everybody's different. I can't say that one thing that works for one person is going to definitely work for another person, but I can tell you that we get a lot of thank yous related to those two issues. So you have people who are really trying to deal with something that's a immediate digestive health issue, and you have people who are trying to optimize their health overall, and of course a big overlap between those two people. So the users of Good Brew fall into both categories: people who are trying to solve some digestive health issue that they have, and people who are trying to just optimize their health through a better, healthier gut. And we hear from both groups of people.
Yeah, I mean, you're really speaking my language. Hearing you talk about proton pump inhibitors, hearing you talk about traditional, acid reducing medications, it sounds like you were in my office, because for years and years and years, I just had this conversation over and over and over and over again with different patients, struggling with different situations and just trying to educate them on the physiology. And what I love about, focusing on providing the body more of the things that it needs and, working with the way the body was designed is, you know, we don't have to know how to quote unquote fix acid reflux. We don't have to know how to quote unquote fix the stomach. The body knows how to do that. We just have to get rid of the things that it doesn't need. And we just have to work with how it was designed to work, give it the things that it does need, and trust that it's going to do what it's supposed to do when it can do that. And we just recognize the way that God made it, it's designed to heal itself. And so if that's not happening, there's something in the way, and figuring that out is part of the process. And so I love that you mentioned that, well, I'm not, treating this condition or offering to cure this condition. You're just giving the body something that it needs, something that it's probably, sorely lacking in
Right.
today's modern America, and trusting that it's going to do a good job and do what it was supposed to do. So I love that. In terms of your own health journey, just jumping back into that for a second, what was something that maybe you wish a practitioner had told you, or that somebody could have told you, when you were in the midst of your struggle with that severe acid reflux? What's something that maybe you didn't know that now you know that you wish you had known back then?
Wow. Well, I don't know. Well, what they could have told me. Well, I mean, obviously, it would have been related to just that we can heal it. I think there is. When somebody told me not too long ago, he said, like, if you the best friends that we have in, say, functional medicine or holistic medicine are retired doctors. So that's one of the things that if you get a doctor off the record, or you get a doctor who's retired and who's seen everything, they will often offer you a lot of information that they won't offer as a practitioner. And that's really a shame, but that's what they follow. They follow these, not every one of them, and a lot of them are now starting to change, but they follow these prescribed, narratives. And
Yeah.
so I guess I would really have liked to heard somebody say, outside of my own research, and is that these things can be cured, and you can heal from them, but but it's obvious that that's not the course that the established medical system takes us on. I mean, if that was the case, there wouldn't be so many people getting, surgeries and having part of their esophagus removed, or on these proton pump inhibitors for decades,
Yeah.
and really doing a lot of damage. And as you know, there was a big class action lawsuit against the proton pump inhibitor. I forget which one that was won, because it was damaging people's guts, but they still use it because it's so painful and it's so debilitating. People continue to use those medications even if they know that they're not good for them. So I think just hearing that, you can't, that there are many people who have cured their problems, and it is something that you can cure. I think also the role that the microbiome plays in all of this, is not well elucidated by the medical community. I think when you look at other studies on other aspects of things that the gut has been doing to help people, even if it's not specifically a study on acid reflux, for example, or constipation, but you can look at the other data that they pick up within those studies, and you can draw a direct correlation between what's going on with this specific case and and this other issue that people are having. So there's many of these kinds of correlations that start to pop up. One of them, is with SSRIs. There's never been really good evidence that SSRIs do anything in the brain, for example. But what they've seen is that the people, a lot of people who have a lot of emotional disorders, have gut health issues, and that SSRIs, if they're doing anything, they're helping people. Not necessarily is the best way to regulate serotonin in your gut, but that's likely what's happening. Is that that's actually regulating, because the gut produces 90% of the serotonin in the body. That the SSR is actually regulating the serotonin in the gut, which that has to do with, and why that has to do with IBS and other issues that these people have, is because the serotonin is the neurotransmitter that signals to the digestive system how to move, or digesting food nutrients through the gut. It signals that process, so it regulates that process. And so that's that. So, and then another case with like PTSD related to the gut, and which would be a really interesting thing to talk about a little bit more. But tertiary to that, they saw that when they started changing the gut microbiome, not only were they helping people with PTSD, but people were also getting reduction in H. pylori counts, and they were getting less, and then they were seeing relief from acid reflux and other digestive health issues. So the study was on PTSD and gut, but you could see these correlating factors to the gut, and why changing the gut microbiome might be improving other other elements that people have.
Yeah, and that's leading right into my next question. Did you read these questions before we started, or how did you know I was going to ask this? But
No, no,
um,
no. Just great minds think alike.
yeah,
I
maybe that's it.
had a guy I worked for when I was in high school, and he always said that whenever thought we'd do something good, even though it was funny. It just brings up good memories. That was his favorite saying.
So, one of the things that I've heard you talk about is the state of our gut is actually shaping the state of our culture. And I don't think many people would make that connection, but how is it that, we'll just call it the broad spectrum health of the guts of Americans, how is that actually affecting our culture, would you say?
Oh, it's affecting our culture in many ways. Let's just take it from like a high level, and that is, when you're sick as an individual, you can't do much more than think about yourself and your problems,
Yeah.
and so not only from there can you not really look at all the other aspects of your life and how to better the other aspects of your life. You can't think about your family, but then when you cumulatively look at that as a whole, if we have a sick society, how do we really have a healthy society? How do we have a society that's not only doing well economically, but also able to think about the real important things like defending our freedoms and all of these other aspects of a free society. Our society, the United States, is based on the people doing things. So, the government works for us, but if we're all sick and they have got us all sick, we're not going to do very well at managing our own lives, much less keeping an eye on all these other important things we're supposed to be doing as American citizens. So yeah, but then they're also looking at very specific things about actually the mood and anxiety. So how are we
Yes.
interacting with one another on a daily interpersonal level? These things are no longer, hypotheses. They're well proven that, your gut's affecting your mood on a daily basis. It's affecting you on a longer term mental health issues, and then even into things like dementia and Alzheimer's. Um, so it's all across the board how we're interacting with one another and the role that our guts play in. That you need healthy cells, you need healthy neurons, you need healthy all of these things working healthy, and then of course spiritually, I mean, it's been well received throughout the generations and millennia that we need to take care of our bodies as spiritual people. We're the body is the temple and whatnot. So you spirituality, health, cognitive abilities, they're all, mind, body, spirit, and social and our social surroundings. They're all intertwined. So yeah, there's very specific things, but it's a very general, a general way of looking at it.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that it's not a new saying by any stretch of the imagination, but the saying goes something like, "You can't pour from an empty cup." And that saying has really just been, resonating with me, especially recently over the last couple of months, but experiencing it for myself. When you've got low energy, when you are really struggling, like you talked about with gut health issues, which can dramatically affect your mood and all of that, it's really hard to do anything outside of yourself. And you mentioned that, it's really hard to really do anything else or think about anyone else or engage in other things because your body is almost like in this survival mode. I just got to get through today. I just have to, function to do what I need to do for myself. But as you improve your health, improve your energy, and you feel good, you feel better, boy, it gets a lot easier to care for other people, to, pay better attention to what's going on in the world, to be engaged with stuff outside of yourself. And so one of my purposes, I feel like, is, obviously, I'm working to try to improve people's physical health, but I feel like as we improve physical health and obviously spiritual health, it comes with its own difficulties, but boy, it gets a lot harder to be a good Christian and to love other people whenever you don't feel good, you don't feel well, you got a crummy attitude, you're irritable, but when you feel better, it's a little easier. And so I feel like part of my job is to improve people's physical health so that their spiritual health can also improve. And I think that is intimately tied with gut health. And so I'm glad that you recognize that and are working towards that same end. So let's talk a little bit more about the gut brain connection. Someone out there that maybe thinks anxiety or burnout or depression, that these are all just brain chemistry issues, that, oh, I must have just a brain chemistry imbalance. Could you talk a little bit about the connection between the microbiome and the gut and these, what we would normally classify as just mental issues?
Right. So there's a lot of research around this, but
Mhm.
one of the stories I like to tell is so not too long ago I was speaking with a Vietnam vet who's a retired dentist. So he keeps up with a lot of these types of things as being a former dentist. Anyhow, we were talking about the gut, and he's like, "Hey, did you know that they're doing a lot of studies on veterans?" He's specifically referring to Vietnam vets, but it actually applies to they've seen it in Gulf War vets and everything else, and the relationship between the gut microbiome and not only in treating PTSD, but also in where it initially um, was the cause of the PTSD. So we know with like autistic children and with people with PTSD, and now more generally with just everybody, but those are very those kinds of cases with autistic children and PTSD is you can really see it very distinct. So changing the microbiome has been associated with lowering anxiety and depression in these groups of people, as well as now the general public. But what even more so, and this is what the retired dentist was talking about. He said, the Vietnam vets, they're looking at why do so many Vietnam vets have PTSD. And then, so maybe the theory maybe is Agent Orange was really messing with people's digestive system and their guts, or maybe it was something else in the environment over there. But nevertheless, they were able to now start to see a big correlation between the gut microbiomes of people that developed PTSD versus those that didn't, even if they experienced the same traumatic event. And so the brain produces serotonin and corticotropin release factor. Corticotropin release factor regulates cortisol, but the gut also produces these two very important compounds, and we produce 90% of the serotonin in the gut, but we also produce this corticotropin factor, and this corticotropin factor is actually produced by the same cell in the gut that produces serotonin. So what they were now this relationship was that the dysbiosis of people who experience trauma and stress, going back to your you can't pour from an empty cup, had less resilience to being able to process the trauma, and so they were more prone to developing PTSD. This is the theory. And so they had higher levels. Not only did they have lower levels of serotonin, but they also had higher levels of this corticotropin factor, meaning they were under higher stress, higher levels of cortisol and adrenaline, and lower levels of serotonin. So they've experienced the stress and the trauma. That's now making their brain, their central nervous system, less capable of processing that event, and therefore leading to PTSD and that sort of thing. There was a famous study done in 2010 with these mice, where they had the mice that were depressed. They would not save themselves from drowning in a pool. They changed the microbiome. The mice started to become less depressed and started swimming for their lives again. Then they cut the vagus nerve in those mice, and the mice went back to being depressed, meaning that the signaling was happening in the gut going to the brain, but they've also seen now we're changing the microbiome also within like 4 weeks, start to change areas of the brain, and depressed people that are shut down will start to light up again and become active again. And this is directly related to changing the microbiome. And so with the microbiome too, let me say, because your audience, I think there's a lot of moms, and they'll appreciate this, that we inherit our microbiome from our mothers. That's where most of it comes from.
Yeah.
And so we have these colonizing microbes that we inherit from our mothers during birth and also during nursing. And that's how important it is. That's how important nature, this relationship with our microbiome is that it actually signals to the mother during nursing to send some of these microbes from the digestive system up to the breast milk so that the child gets them that way as well. And we know that from every generation since antibiotics were in heavy use, that the microbiome has become less diverse. But at the same time, antibiotics started to become prevalent. Other things started to become prevalent too. Other medications and things that we were taking that also disrupt the microbiome, preservatives, pesticides, other toxins that are in our environment. All of those things after post-World War II basically became much more prevalent in the Western culture. So we've attacked our gut microbiome on many levels, and all these artificial colorings and things like that we're putting into foods. Also, we know RFK did a kind of a montage video that he posted not too long ago about the impact of the gut microbiome and all these things that are affecting it, and how changing the microbiome reduced violent tendencies in people that were incarcerated and other groups of people, and all of these kinds of things. So then this also gets into all these autoimmune responses.
When your drainage system backs up, your body cannot eliminate waste effectively, and that leaves you vulnerable to chronic inflammation and illness. Bowel Mover supports healthy elimination at the colon, keeping your drainage funnel flowing. Find it at discoverhealth.gethealthy.store. High-quality supplements for real healing. And don't forget to use code FIRST10 for 10% off your first order.
So in addition to, this relationship between the gut and the brain directly with the serotonin production, corticotropin factors, but also, short chain fatty acids is another very, very important one. The gut microbiome is responsible for producing the short chain fatty acids. The body doesn't produce short chain fatty acids. We get a little bit from the food that we eat, but 95% of it's the responsibility of the gut microbiome. And without these short chain fatty acids, our cells don't function properly. The short chain fatty acids produced by the gut microbiome provide 70% of the energy needs of the cells in the gut. And then those short chain fatty acids also circulate through the body, through the cardiovascular system, and feed the cells throughout the body. And so we have an unhealthy gut microbiome, we're not producing the short chain fatty acids, and therefore our cells are trying to scavenge for energy from sources that are not preferred, and which causes a lot of metabolic problems within the cells, and that gets into a lot of inflammatory and autoimmune problems. But it also, in addition, so it's like it's like an engine where one little part starts to go wrong, and then the vibrations start to cause problems all through the engine everywhere else, and everything starts to fall off the car, and that kind of thing. That's what happens here when the gut gets in dysbiosis, because that lack of short chain fatty acids not only is directly influencing how healthy we're functioning from a cellular level, just from lack of the short chain fatty acid, but then that starts to cause problems in the epithelial lining of the gut, and we start to get these leaky gut syndromes, and so things start to get out of the gut, and then our body sees that, the immune system sees those things, and starts to create antigens, and we start to attack these escaping undigested particles of food and toxic materials and things that should stay in the gut or should be getting eliminated through the gut. And now we're attacking those, causing all these inflammatory responses and autoimmune responses, which then also affects your cognitive health and your ability to think clearly. So it's a whole cycle of things, just like getting exercise and things that are so important. This is the role that the gut plays as well.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what area of health you're trying to improve, what area that you feel like you're really struggling with, improving your gut will probably benefit it, and it will make anything else you're doing more effective
Yes.
in terms of working on your health. And you said a lot of things there, and I want to try to, sum it up if I can, but we get our microbiome largely from our mother at birth. But unfortunately, if you're born through C-section, you miss out on that. You've got to go through the birth canal to pick up that microbiome. And then one way that the mother helps support that and, firm up that foundation is by breastfeeding. And so if you missed out on that, if you were born C-section and you weren't breastfed, then you're missing a huge component of essential things to calm your nervous system. Amazingly, the microbiome is communicating with your brain through the vagus nerve, which is crazy to think about. You've got these things that aren't necessarily you communicating with your brain without your, conscious knowledge, but that provides so many different compounds that really help with healing and help with immune function and help with brain health, all these things. And so you're at a bit of a disadvantage. And so if you're a mom or you're pregnant or you're thinking about having more kids, do everything you can to try to have a natural birth and, have kids naturally, everything that you can to do that in a healthy way. And then breastfeed your kids, because you're going to set them up for much better life in terms of their health, in terms of their gut health by doing that. And so the microbiome is just absolutely huge, not only for brain health, but for everything else. And you can really protect you moving forward. So you touched on so many different things there. I wanted to try to sum it up just a little bit, if I could, for our listeners. Now, you mentioned all these factors, everything from potentially, chemicals from Vietnam era, Agent Orange, stuff like that, to herbicides and pesticides that are around today, that are used today. Could you go into a little bit more detail on processed foods? I know you mentioned food dyes and some preservatives, but how are these modern foods feeding burnout? How are they feeding gut health issues?
Right. Well, that's obviously, there's there's preservatives. They're affecting the microbiome. There's, food colors that are affecting the microbiome, but there's also just the proliferation of sugar that is really affecting the microbiome. And even people who are doing things that might be healthy, like going on a carnivore diet, if you're not getting the proper types of fiber, et cetera, in combination with that, you'll have a microbiome that changes to just feeding on whatever you're putting into the gut. But then you won't have the nutrients needed to produce the short chain fatty acids to really get the benefits of what you're eating, and in fact maybe even be harmed by eating too much of say just a protein based diet if you're not feeding the microbiome these other nutrient sources that it needs to be balanced, to be in homeostasis, to actually break down those proteins so that they're into peptides and amino acids so that your body can actually use them. And yeah, so I would say there's all of whatever you feed your gut, eventually you're going to support a microbiome that likes to feed on what that is. But it even gets a little more pernicious because we also know that a lot of these molecules, like these bacteria that like to feed on sugar, for example, they might not be doing much of any other benefit for us, but they'll actually start to signal. They're starting to see that these microbes they want to maintain an environment that they like, and so they'll actually start signaling to the body to crave sugar, for
Yeah.
example. And I think there's going to be a lot more on this. I think that we know that that the gut affects stress, but we also know that stress affects the gut. And when we're under stress, severe stress, the gut will actually shut down. There's actually the term of being unhygienic has actually been used in relationship to stress because our body tries to give more energy to the brain. So it says, okay, gut, stop working. The brain needs needs all the energy it can get. Well, if that's over a short period of time, like let's say you've got, some people have digestive issues when they have to speak in public or those sorts of things, or maybe getting attacked by a lion. You know, you have a problem, but that's
I'll speak
okay.
in
And
public. I don't want the lion. I'll do the speaking in public thing.
yeah, right. So you end up with some short-term gut health problems, but when you're under chronic stress, that the gut maintains this kind of shut down environment, and then that starts to affect the microbiome, and so the microbiome starts to create the environment that it wants to live in. So whether we're eating too much sugar or we're under stress or they're working back and forth, the microbes want to live in the environment that they like. So even with like H. pylori, I believe they'll start seeing where even with like H. pylori probably produces some sort of signal to the nervous system that keeps it under stress because it likes that environment and it's favorable for H. pylori, etc. But so the stomach is the most acidic part of the body, and that's produced by the body itself. Those acids and enzymes. Then the small intestine is supposed to be more neutral, and then the lower intestine. The lower intestine actually is like a home for the microbiome. I mean, that is the role of the large intestine, is to basically produce an environment for the microbial activity to take place, which has a tremendous amount to do with finishing off the digestion of our food, and especially breaking down proteins. That's why, like the strain of probiotic that we use actually has clinical studies behind it showing a big increase in protein utilization, which is important for all these other functions in the body, but producing these short chain fatty acids. So, but it's acidic if it's healthy. So the lower intestine is about a 5.5 pH when it's healthy, but that pH, unlike in the stomach, is produced by the microbes themselves. So when we get in dysbiosis, the bad bacteria start to produce an environment that it has a higher pH, and that makes it unfriendly for the good microbes, and they're there, but they're sequestered and they're not doing the job that they need to do. And so the foods that we're eating are really impacting how the gut microbiome sustains itself in the lower intestine. But then when it gets in dysbiosis, it's very hard for it to pull itself back up into homeostasis.
Mhm.
And that gets back to this subject we were talking about with the microbiome coming from our mothers. There is something that God has done and put there for us, and that is these transitory probiotics. And so there are probiotics that are spore forming probiotics that survive out in the environment, in the sunlight, in air, and they're in a spore. And that's what we use in Good Brew, and that's why you can use it in coffee. But what it does is these spores survive the stomach. So the stomach is the first defense against anything coming in. So that's why most of these probiotics that you try to buy and take in capsule form have a very hard time getting to the lower intestine, is because they don't survive the shelf, but they also don't survive through the stomach and the stomach acid. But these spore forming probiotics that we would get, like, digging up foods, roots and vegetables and things from the soil, um, they do support the microbiome that we get from our mothers, and they're transitory. They come in, they survive through the stomach acid, and then they bloom in the lower intestine, and they produce a lot of the metabolites and the acidity levels that the colonizing microbes love, and then they pass on through. And when you combine that with the fiber, a good source of fiber, prebiotic fiber, which feeds the microbiome, which allows it to produce these short chain fatty acids, B vitamins, and all these other very important things, you get what's called a symbiotic relationship. And then that really helps to build up everything that's there. So from nature, we can get probiotics from outside of what we get from our mothers, but they're transitory, and they're spores. And then so of lactobacillus, bifidobacteria, akkermansia. These are very well known and important keystone colonizing microbes that we get from our mothers. Well, that lactobacillus is the one that really creates the environment in the lower intestine. That's more on the acidic side, because lacto relates to lactic acid. And that's also what, like, manages and controls candida and a lot of these other bad bacteria, and it creates that pH. So the Bacillus coagulans probiotic that we use in Good Brew also produces lactic acid. And so nature has provided something that can come in as sort of like a reinforcement to the colonizing microbes, start to produce that lactic acid also in the lower intestine, that then helps support the lactobacillus and get everything going again, and really helping to, it's like reinforcement to the all those good microbes that we got from our moms. And you need the soluble fiber with that. And that said, many of the fibers that are sold on the market by big pharma are not even fibers that we would normally get in nature to feed our microbiome, but they're selling them as these prebiotic fibers. So the biggest ones on the market are corn dextrins and wheat dextrins and synthetic fibers, none of which we normally get in nature. Those dextrins have to be processed out. They're not, when you just eat wheat or something, you don't get those as a fiber. The fiber is so important in and of itself. And if you ever buy a capsule and it says it has a prebiotic in it, or, the thing is the capsule is not large enough to actually hold a significant amount. So, by using our products in a scoop, so by using a scoop, a couple of benefits to that. One is the big one is you actually get a significant amount of fiber with a scoop that you can't get from a capsule, the other is you can adjust it to what works for you. So we have lots of our customers who just use one scoop, and we always tell people who start using the product to just use one scoop and see how that works, because you can have an adjustment period or whatnot. But for many people, one scoop is all they need. And we basically I use 2 scoops a day. The serving is really based on 2 scoops. So not only do we try to make a product that people can afford to use regularly and not overprice it, we can price it a lot more and still be competitive. But we also, try to make it so that people use what works for them.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you touched on, and it just kind of reminds me of the importance of the terrain. If you've got an environment that is feeding the bad guys, you can kill all the bad guys you want, but if you've still got plenty of food and resources for them to thrive, guess what? They're going to come right back. But whenever you start to change that environment and make it a great place for the beneficial bacteria to live, then guess what? The beneficial bacteria are going to be able to live. They're going to be able to not only just pass through, being transient like you talked about, they can hopefully form colonies and put down roots. That's what we want. We want the good guys to put down roots. And this is a major focus of how I try to educate people. It's not just about, killing bad guys or, getting rid of these bad bacteria or these bad organisms, whatever they are. You also have to create a healthy environment for the good things to live, and for you to be able to benefit from those good things. I talk a lot about, your backyard. If your backyard has, a vegetable garden and brush piles and tall grass, rabbits are going to love to live there. You can try to catch rabbits and get rid of them, but until you clean up that brush and, protect your garden, your vegetables, rabbits are going to come back, and the same thing is going to happen with bad bacteria, and same thing is going to happen with candida or H. pylori or whatever those things are. And so I love that one of the things that you focus on is providing food, given that fiber, the stuff that's going to feed the good bacteria along with the product. So you've convinced me to this point that, okay, gut health is important. You've convinced me that I probably should work on improving my microbiome. Okay, so I want to go out and I want to, get a probiotic or something. Can you walk me through what are some things that we should be looking for as consumers? Things that might be good, things that we should be looking for, and also maybe there's some red flags or some things that are just marketing tricks or gimmicks that we should avoid whenever we're looking for gut health products, especially probiotic type products.
Yeah, there's a couple of things there I like to mention, but I'd also, the way you just described taking care of your gut, there's one other thing that people often bring up in relation to what you were just saying, is that some people know that the cells in the gut turn over very fast. Like every
Hmm.
6, 7 days, you get new cells in the gut. And people often ask, well, if my cells are turning over that quickly, why isn't that fixing my gut? And it's exactly what you said. Your body wants, that's how important the gut is. And the fact that
Yeah.
those cells turn over that fast is not, your body wouldn't use that energy and if that wasn't important. But if you don't have a healthy gut microbiome, you're not feeding it correctly, doesn't matter if you turn those cells over, they're still going to be under the same environment that you created. So with looking at probiotics, going back to like the C sections and that sort of thing, if a person has a child that's having a lot of issues that might have either through a heavy antibiotic regimen when they were young or C-section or whatever, definitely also look into fecal transplants. The research on fecal transplants is really really encouraging.
For those of
And
you
for
that don't know what a fecal transplant is, I hate to be the one to explain it to. Maybe I should make you do it, but I'll explain it. But essentially, you're taking stool, poop from somebody with a healthy microbiome, and then you're putting that in somebody that does not have a healthy microbiome. That's a fecal transplant.
Yeah, exactly. And the research is, so if you think there's any question to how important the microbiome is, you should look at the case studies of the changes in people's lives after these things. So not everybody necessarily needs a fecal transplant, but if you have a child or something that's having a lot of struggles with, they're relating this stuff now to ADHD and
Yes.
everything else. So, if there's a situation where you might be at that extreme level, or even an adult who's might have gone through chemotherapy or something like that, you need to start looking at these things, because your gut microbiome can really get wiped out, and that might be one of the most effective ways to deal with that. But for the average everyday person, keep in mind that most of these colonizing microbes weren't intended to enter our bodies from the outside. They were intended to get them from our mothers, and so it's very hard for them to survive on a shelf, and it's very hard for them to survive through your stomach acid. So you just need to keep in mind that when you're out there at the store buying these things, just because it says it's a probiotic, and people are going out and studying this, they're picking these things up off the shelves and they're taking them to labs, and they're showing that there's just really not, the probiotics aren't there that they said that were going to be there, because they're dying. And so you need to, first of all, be aware of that. The other thing is you need to be aware of is that your gut microbiome is as unique to you as your thumbprint is. And therefore, if somebody's saying, hey, there's this certain magic combination or concoction of probiotics and that you take, that's really grasping at straws for many cases. So certainly go out and experiment and try different things and see if it helps you. But just keep in mind that it's to say that it's a lot of marketing is basically what I'm saying.
Yeah.
When somebody says, everybody comes up with some new formulation of strains of probiotics to put together, and this is the magic bullet, a lot of that's just marketing. They have to be different, so they're just saying this is it. And we've actually tried some. We have two ingredients. Ours, we use no preservatives, no processing aids, and we've actually tried adding other probiotics. There are other spore forming probiotics, and it negated the benefits. And so more is not necessarily better. Different probiotics, different bacteria have different roles to play, and some of them are very supporting just in general, and some of them might not really play very well with the rest of your gut microbiome. In addition to that, so keep different things in mind. With that, and also in the combinations of foods you're eating. But here's one of the things I've been saying more recently. I had a friend back in the summer here, and she was making her own probiotic in a yogurt, right? So, and I really like this. And then she started putting our product in there. Now, our product has a spore forming probiotic, so that's not really, you don't really have to put it in the yogurt, but it does support these other probiotics very well, and it does have the inulin fiber in there, which is good for culturing these other ones. And so it might not be a bad idea to put it in some yogurt that you're making, or just take it at the same time you're eating your yogurt. But I really like this idea of people culturing, if you're into this kind of thing, making your own yogurt, because you can't buy yogurts off the shelf. They've been pasteurized, they got preservatives in them. The very few of them will have really insignificant amount of probiotic. But
Yeah,
if you take
pasteurization essentially means they kill them all. So
right,
yes, it was in there, but then it's been killed so it can be put on the shelf.
yeah, exactly. But you can buy a probiotic off the shelf if it's a good one. You can put it in the yogurt that you're making at home. It will now cause that probiotic to multiply and proliferate. And so now when you eat your own homemade yogurt, you're actually going to get a lot more and a much better chance of that probiotic reaching the lower intestine where you want it, to reach, and so I really like that aspect. If you're capable of doing that, everybody's, their lives allow for them to have these extra hobbies and things, but I don't think it's very hard to do, and I would really encourage people to do that if you're really trying to get serious about adding some
Mhm.
other specific probiotic to your diet. But of course, with our product, you're supporting that in a different way. There's 25 clinical studies behind the strain of Bacillus coagulans that we use in Good Brew to support better protein utilization, immune function, digestive function. In addition to the fact with the fiber, it's supporting all these other probiotics as well, the good microbiome. And so that's another approach that you can take, is how do I support the microbiome that I have? Now, just keep in mind, if you're dealing with something with IBS or SIBO, a lot of times when you start adding fiber, you can inflame that issue. So you need to go and really in baby steps, when you're doing that. And we have had people who had something going on like that, and when they first started using our product, they probably went a little heavy on it, and they couldn't deal with it. But then they went. I mean, actually, I have people who've told me this, but they said they knew something was changing. So a few months went by, and they went about it a little differently and went a lot slower, and actually are now repeat customers of ours. So whether you're using our product or just trying to add fiber or something, remember the gut. Every microbe is going to feed on something. So if you already have a lot of bad microbes or overgrowth of microbes in the wrong part of the gut, they're still going to feed on that fiber. So it doesn't select, the fiber doesn't select which thing gets to feed on it. So that's one of the benefits of using it in combination with like a spore forming probiotic like ours, is that you're giving a good microbe the fiber to feed on directly at the time you're taking it. So hopefully with time you eventually end up feeding all the other good ones, because you're producing the metabolites that they like. So yeah, the shelf life and surviving your stomach. Some of these need to be refrigerated. You got to experiment. You got to try. Stay away from the fibers that aren't really the ones we get in nature. That's another really problematic thing. They're sticking all kinds of stuff in things and calling it fiber that, not really what you want in your gut.
Yeah, here's some ground up tires. That's fiber now.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So,
So I just want to ask you just a couple real quick questions before we end out here. You've mentioned that faith has been a part of your journey. How has faith actually been a part of your personal health story? And how has it been a part of how you've built and how you operate your business that you have now?
well, right. Yeah. So I think as an individual, every time we get under stress, something about prayer, really, I don't know, you really feel it, right? Like, I mean, I believe that the healing power of God. So I think in general sense, I've always been somebody that prayed, even when I'm not living my best life or haven't lived my best life. I always seem to be something that you could always go back to was prayer. But then as I got into, I think, this situation a number of years ago where I was having a lot of gut health issues, and I was had another business that I put tons of effort into, and I had lots of investment in from other people. It was going wrong with a really bad marriage, and I mean, I was suicidal there for a
Mhm.
while, and it was really bad. And focusing on, I think this is just, I'm not here to preach, but something in me really started finding the importance of gratitude, real gratitude for just being alive, just for the simplest things that we have and the things that we don't have. And um, I kind of come to the conclusion on my own, and I think if you read through history and even people that are around you who have gone through troubling things, whether it's a big physical problem or social problem or whatever, is people start to come back and learning about the importance of gratitude as a mindset. And I believe to me, that's what our Creator wants from us. The Creator, God, wants us to be grateful. I think that's like the biggest. I think that's why it makes us healthy. It makes us feel good and allows us to recover and to start to think clearly, is because that is the ultimate, thank you to God and our Creator. And I think, Christ focused on that a lot too. Give thanks. You look at this, really rough environment everybody's living in, and the persecution that all these people are going through, and all the hate and everything that's in the world, and one group of people trying to kill another group of people. But part of being forgiving is being grateful. So for me, gratitude and gratitude to a higher meaning and a higher power um, did a lot for me. I actually have a little side project called Gratitude Makes the Attitude, but yeah, no, that to me did a lot. It did a lot. It allowed me to come back to being an entrepreneur and started a new product, a new project that relates to health and well-being. So, yeah, that's my story. You know,
I think gratitude is so powerful in so many ways, and as you pointed out, even what we might call secular groups are recognizing the benefits of gratitude and what it does to your nervous system and all of that. But I think what's amazing about gratitude is it acknowledges that whatever you've benefited from, whatever you're grateful for, isn't from you. It isn't something that you've deserved and earned, and it's not, and that is the essence of the gospel. It's not something that you can earn. It's not something that, oh, wow, you were such an amazing person that God chose to make you part of his team. You didn't deserve it, but it was given to you. That's grace. And so gratitude is acknowledging the grace that God has given you. And amazingly, it's almost like God knew what he was doing when we acknowledge the gift and the amazing things that he's done for us. There's benefits, whether or
yes.
not, you choose to fully grasp that and receive the gospel or not, there's still benefits to being grateful. And so I'm so thankful
Well, that's
for.
what I think a lot of people end up turning to God is when they become grateful, right? So it's like everybody's like, what is the purpose of life? Why are we here? And I think it's kind of what you were just saying. You've been granted life. You're
Yeah.
here to do something. And I think that's a lot of times when we really get smacked around by life is when we're not being grateful. So that humility allows us to is directly related to the grateful, to being grateful, and helping us to be re- be rewarded by life, whatever it is. So whatever our struggles are, and it's a tough. I mean, you have to be grateful even in the tough times, and that's what's hard. And you have to be grateful for the challenges that have been put into your life, which is also tough. And that'll stick in the crawl of your throat to try and make yourself say, "I'm grateful for whatever this thing or person that you really don't like or haven't liked, or you point to as being a big source of your problems." But then when you're grateful for it, all of a sudden it turns the whole picture. So I'm not going to go too far into but let's say acid reflux or GERD. Okay, so you could, why do I have this, God? Why are you punishing me? But then it's like, I'm grateful for having acid reflux. Can you really say, people? That's hard to say because it's so painful. But okay, when you start saying it like that, now what answers start to come? I'm grateful for it now. I'm grateful for this because it's now teaching me how to take care of my body. It's allowing me to expand, and maybe in my case, it even led to helping me start a business. But these things that feel like punishment, but once you start making, and it can be very hard. I mean, like you got some funny examples of that, but like even like my ex mother-in-law, like when I started having to make myself say I'm grateful for her, like, like all things changed because, well, why am I grateful for her? Well, without her, I wouldn't have my daughter, right? Like, okay, so I'm grateful for her for that, and all of a sudden the picture starts to change. And I think that's what God wants from it. That's what allows us to start to live together. That's what allows, what Christ's big message of we're all equal under the eyes of God. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you're from or what,
Hmm.
or what group of people or culture you're with. You're all humbled under God. And a lot of other religions don't teach, they didn't teach that and still don't teach that, and that's always causes conflict, right? And so,
Right.
because but Christ will say, no, we're all humble. You be grateful to God that you're here on this earth, and now, once you start seeing it that way, you all can live in peace together.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
changes things.
Yeah.
So for maybe someone listening, maybe a mom that is experiencing gut health issues that she acknowledges, or maybe we've got listeners that are experiencing other health issues that they're not necessarily relating directly to their gut. Maybe they've got, anxiety, or maybe there's something, even depression or low energy or aches and pains, stuff that we don't relate. What are some of your best tips to help shift maybe a busy mom's health trajectory? What are some of your best tips to improve digestion, energy, and focus?
Well, the big ones, cutting out sugar as much as possible because that just really wears on our cell. We're not supposed to get that
Mhm.
much sugar. You get your sugar in combination with fiber. So whether that's fiber with the Good Brew or whether it's fiber with the fruits you're eating. So we know that it's unquestionable that our bodies absorb and manage the carbohydrates and sugar especially much better when it's in combination with fiber. So it's hard, but try to stay away from the real, processed things, the candies and the desserts and all of that kind of stuff, and get your sugar with fiber. Get exercise, and sleep if you can, but they're going to all be important. But look at your gut situation. How there's a lot of there's actually a good book. I guess it's just sitting right here. This book has sold a lot of copies. It's called Gut. It's called Gut, just called Gut. It's a little bit dated now, but the lady who wrote it is a doctor from Germany. This thing sold like over 5 million copies. Well, it says here over 5 million copies sold. Um, I love that book because she writes in such a way that's more than just talking about the microbiome. Even though it's a little bit dated book, she writes in such a way that it really makes you understand how important your gut is and how complex it is, but also how beautiful it is. Um,
Mhm.
so 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 in addition to changing your diet and watching the sugars and carbohydrates, eating balance, pay attention to your gut and how you're feeling. The gut intuition and gut feelings, but then also how you're digesting your food and those sorts of things, which you can notice on a regular basis, will all end up impacting your energy, your mood, and that kind of thing. But gut intuition is a real thing. And they know, the studies show that when the gut is healthy and we're acting healthy, you kind of get this reserve, like we were talking about. You can't pour from an empty cup, but you start to build this reserve. And so you have more fuel in the tank and you're going to have more energy. You're going to perform better in the things and tasks that you have. Um, but keep an eye on that and how you're feeling, because they also have shown that where gut intuition is very important and can help us make decisions. Like, I think there's even put like a number on it, like 60 to 70% better decisions when your analytical mind is in agreement with your gut feeling. So I got a good gut feeling about this, and I also have a good analytical feeling about it. They're in agreement. Just something like, say, 70% better decision making. However, they've also shown that when you're in dysbiosis, that your gut starts to lie to your brain. So yeah, so yeah, if you get into dysbiosis, your gut now is not in court. You get bad signaling from the gut to the brain, and now you start to see problems where problems don't really exist. Paranoia, stuff like that might start to play a role, and it might be coming from the gut and not and,
Yep.
and not from the brain. Yeah,
If you want to make better decisions, get a good gut. So,
get a good
uh,
gut. That's yeah. Well, just one other thing. There's a correlation from serotonin. Serotonin produced in the gut makes its way into the cells where it converts to melatonin, and that melatonin is extremely important to supporting mitochondrial function. So we know if we have dysbiosis, we're producing less quantities of serotonin, which ultimately has a downstream effect on mitochondrial function that way also.
Yeah, absolutely. Gabe, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and explaining a little bit about what you do and the importance of gut health. Before we go, how could people, learn more about you and your work, and where could people find your product, Good Brew?
Yeah, the best thing to do is just go to goodbru.com. That's spelled BRU. So, GOODBRU.com. And you can read about the product there. I mean, obviously, if you Google my name now, I do quite a few of these podcasts, so you can maybe listen to some other podcasts if you care to. Also, we created a discount code for your audience. It's just SHARP, so SHARP, right? That's correct. And
Right. Yeah.
at the discount to get another 10% off of anything that's on the site. And this is going to be around New Year's, I think. So there will probably be some New Year's specials on the site at the same time that you can, in addition, apply that 10% discount, SHARP. So yeah, goodbru.com, BRU. That's the best
Thank you.
way to find it.
Yeah, that's really great. Take advantage of the discount and also the timing, try to hit the special. And that's amazing that they go together. So, Gabe, thanks again for being part of our podcast. We'll definitely be keeping an eye out for what you're doing in the future and what you're going to be coming out with next. And we'll hopefully get to talk to you again sometime in the near future.
That would be great. Well, I really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to the Discover Health podcast. Remember, your health is a journey, not a destination. Keep exploring, and we'll see you next week.